So the Paul Manafort case is really interesting because it is part of this imaginary world that the press has us living in, or is trying to have us living in, where this vast conspiracy surrounds the Trump campaign. The way I read Donald Trump is I read Donald Trump, as I've said this many times, that Donald Trump is a guy who learns stuff, right? He's a guy, he doesn't read a lot, I don't think, but he learns stuff when he is thrown into a situation. He learns about it. And this is what he said was going to happen. And I think it has, and I think it is happening. And when he started out, he was hiring people who could not do the job. And one of them was Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort is a guy that I don't really have a lot of good feeling about. I think the fact that they could get him on tax fraud and all this stuff probably means there's something there. We don't know. We'll see what happens at the trial. I don't think they went after him for that. I think they went after him for being associated with Donald Trump. I think this investigation is looks to me to have been very tainted by guys like John Brennan and James Clapper and James Comey, who seem to have organized an investigation that started way before they say it started. But I think that it's interesting to watch how the imagination of the press is constructing this. But before we do this, let's bring on Jenna Ellis, because I want to talk to her about this. She is, of course, she's on here a lot, almost as much as me. She's the director of the Dobson Policy Center. She's an accomplished constitutional law attorney and also has a background in criminal law, contracts, public policy, leadership, and ethics. And she is the author of The Legal Basis for a Moral Constitution, a guide for Christians to understand America's current constitutional crisis. And I now actually have my own copy of this book, which has finally arrived, and I've just started it, and I'm not deep enough in it to talk about it. Jenna, are you there?
I am. Nice to see you again, Andrew. And I'm so glad that you got the copy of the book. You failed to mention I signed it for you, which I hope is helpful. So,
I did. I was very touched. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So explain what did they get Manafort on? This is, they put a special counsel out, and his brief is to go after Russian collusion and the Trump campaign, and this has nothing to do with that.
It has nothing to do with this whatsoever. And in both on the state and federal level, I mean, there are always prosecutions daily for actual crimes that don't ever get in front of the news. And so the fact that they're going after him for something like tax fraud and other types of fraud, conspiracy, all of this, those aren't specifically unique charges in the sense that, this happens daily. But I think you're totally right, Andrew, that but for his connection very, very briefly to the Trump campaign, we wouldn't be hearing about this in the news at all, and he probably would not even be charged. And that's what's incredibly significant here, is that for Mueller especially, to be the one leading this type of investigation for something that has absolutely nothing to do with his special prosecution, well outside the scope, this just shows that he's trying to justify his existence right now, rather than just saying, I'm closing the investigation because I didn't find any leads. There's no collusion with Russia at all. And that's what a prosecutor is actually supposed to do with an investigation, is investigate. And it's fully okay to say, we didn't find anything, we're closing it.
Do you think he'll do that? How do you feel? How do you feel when you see this? It does make me feel, you set a dog on a trail, he's going to find a trail. You set a prosecutor after criminals, he's going to find criminals. Does this tell you anything about the investigation, this Manafort charges?
It does. And I think that when prosecutors have that mindset and that orientation of there's always a crime somewhere, that's a really dangerous ground for a prosecutor. I used to be a prosecutor, and then I was a criminal defense attorney for a while. I still occasionally practice in that area. And when you have the philosophy of prosecution that we're going to charge something, that becomes really dangerous and, frankly, outside the scope of the higher ethical responsibility of a prosecutor. So Mueller's under a lot of pressure to find something and, again, to justify his existence. And so this really, to me, is a trial that is testing whether or not the jury there in Arlington, Virginia, likes Trump or not. That's really the issue here. And that shouldn't be the issue. It should have nothing to do in the media with the Trump campaign at all. I mean, the charges are completely, absolutely irrelevant to anything related to Russia or Trump. But we're seeing this in the news, and this has dominated the headlines literally just because of his very brief connection to Trump. And that's frankly not, that's irresponsible to Manafort himself. Because if you're being prosecuted, Andrew, for example, just because you have, a brief connection with a friend that is now in the political context. And so now they're going after you for something years and years ago. That's more of a political hit job than it is actually a prosecutor doing their ethical job. So I think what the president tweeted this morning in terms of just saying, close the investigation, and it was not a call on Attorney General Jeff Sessions to do that. He said Sessions should close the investigation. That's not a command. That's just saying he should close that. And I think that's absolutely fair and accurate.
Because they're not coming up with anything that they were assigned to do. You think this is just evidence of that? I have to go back for a minute. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I was going to say, we don't even know the full scope
right.
of his investigation. We don't know any of the evidence, but if there was something after there's so much pressure on him to actually do something and have these types of indictments, if this is the only thing he can come up with, and this Manafort trial is the big win for him out of his full investigation, then that just shows there's absolutely no evidence.
The judge said, I was surprised to hear you say that you think the jury is going to decide this to some degree on their feelings about Trump. The judge has said, basically, I don't want to hear about Trump in this trial because he's not involved. And he really did smack Mueller once for saying, this, it's basically what you're saying now, but for saying you only came up with this because you're after Trump. Do you actually think a jury might just say, look, we're not going to, yes, he may have hidden the money, may have committed bank fraud, but we're not going to do anything about it because it's not fair? Do you think that's a possibility?
They may. That's absolutely a possibility. Juries are sacrosanct in the sense that they go back into their deliberation room, and how they weigh and interpret the evidence is up to them. They are the fact finders. And so they are given all of the evidence, they are given the jury instructions, and then they decide based on the facts and the law that they're given. And so no one really would know, is there that potential bias? That's what jury selection is supposed to elicit. The fact that jury selection in this case only took 1 day was actually surprising to me as a defense attorney. I have had felony cases that are nowhere close to being in the news, that jury selection has taken 2 to 3 days or even longer than that, just because of the nature of the case. So to find 6 men and 6 women who have said clearly to the court, and the court is accepting that they can be fair and impartial in this, I hope that they will. And I hope that Judge Ellis, who, by the way, I don't know that there's any relation to me, but it's a good last name, that the judge has been very, very clear to say, stay on the relevant topic as it relates to the charges. That's a good thing. But we don't know at this point, and I don't know, I wasn't there in jury selection, to know whether or not the jurors have heard about this in the news, whether they're taking that and their life experience in with them, and whether or not they'll decide it based on it.
Interesting. I have to ask you before I let you go about Brett Kavanaugh. To my surprise, this process where he goes around meeting the senators, this is obviously Trump's pick for the Supreme Court, has been kind of quiet. It's not that the Democrats have been quiet about it, it's that the press has not been over covering it. It's a slow news summer, pretty much since Helsinki anyway. That's a week of slow news now constitutes an entire summer in the Trump administration. But it's been quiet. How do you feel this is going? Are you tracking this?
Yeah, I think it's going really well, and that's probably why we haven't heard, CNN and some of the other outlets kind of squawking about it, because Kavanaugh represents himself incredibly well. He is extremely qualified. In looking at a confirmation that will happen likely right before the midterms, President Trump made a really great selection because nobody can say anything about it. The mainstream media tried, and the best they could come up with was that in college he liked ketchup on pasta and his name sounds like a frat boy. If that's all that they can come up with, then you know that he's doing incredibly well meeting on the Hill with senators, even some of the Democrats. And for them to push back just on a political partisan issue, that's not their job. They have to look at whether he's fundamentally competent. And once the confirmation hearings actually start, and of course, those will be live streamed, we'll all get to see that. I think that'll be in the news. But all that Kavanaugh has to do is just stay, very straight on target. He has to just show why he is absolutely qualified for this. And if they make a fit about it, then that's really trying to score cheap political points instead of looking at him for the qualified person that he is.
Do you think he'll have any trouble with the liberal Republicans?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, because he's had a very clear record since 2006 that he has stayed in an originalist lane. And to me, as a constitutional law attorney myself, that's actually a really, really great thing, because we're not trying, and we shouldn't be trying, neither side, to get activists on the court. We want to have fair umpires, to use a baseball analogy, someone that isn't wearing the hat of either team. They're fairly calling balls and strikes. And so we don't want an outcome-based court like it has been for the past, 40, even 60 years on the court. We want someone who will fairly stay in the constitutional lane, analyze the issues, and apply facts to the law and uphold the Constitution. And so I think that the GOP, even those that are maybe a little bit more liberal Republicans, will recognize that, and they would have a very difficult time justifying a no vote.
Jenna Ellis, thank you so much for coming on. It's always great to see you, director of the Dobson Policy Center. I'm started your book, and when I read it, I will ask you to come back and we can talk about it.
Sounds good. Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jenna. So I have to play how CNN is reporting. Like I said, they're fighting for your imagination all the time. That's what they're fighting. They want you to think about it as it's in your imagination. And Jim Acosta went to Tampa for the Trump rally in Tampa, Florida. And he starts talking about the Russia investigation and off the Manafort trial. And let's just play the first minute of this. This is cut 6.
With the Mueller investigation's first trial now underway, President Trump and his lawyers seem to be cooking up a new defense slogan of their own. The president will hold, by the way, a campaign rally shortly down in Tampa, Florida. Let's go there. Our chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, is already on the scene for us. So, Jim, what's the latest?
Right. Well, President Trump is in Florida tonight to do some campaigning ahead of the midterm elections, but the president and his team are still busy trying to get their story straight on the Russia investigation. Mr. Trump is now echoing his lawyers, who have gone from saying there was no collusion during the 2016 election to insisting that collusion is not a crime after all. Breezing past the cameras on his way to Florida, President Trump appears to have a new strategy for the Russia investigation. Ignore questions from reporters while spinning up a new defense where he's shielded from outside scrutiny. Tweeting collusion is not a crime. It's a notable leap from the president, who has repeatedly claimed there was no collusion with the Russians during the 2016 campaign.
If you couldn't see that, they put the tweet up on the camera, and the camera says there was no collusion, but the tweet says collusion is not a crime, but that doesn't matter because there was no collusion. And there's Acosta lying to you. They're saying he's not saying this anymore, while it's right there on camera. I mean, the guy can't even. And then he talks about Trump getting his story straight. Acosta can't get his story straight. And the other thing, of course, is the whole report starts off with the Paul Manafort trial starting. The Russia investigation is, the Paul Manafort trial. It may be he may have been caught up in this, and as Jenna said, he wouldn't probably have been caught up in it if he hadn't worked for Trump. But it has nothing. It happened before he worked for Trump. It was about the Ukrainians. The people who were involved were the Podestas. It was Tony and John Podesta who were part of the Clinton campaign. It is amazing to me. Now that has been passed on that has been referred to the New York federal attorney. So maybe we'll see something on that. I don't know. Tucker Carlson was saying that they'd been offered immunity, but that hasn't been proved yet. We don't see. I have to play what happened next with this Acosta thing. Is the group of Trump supporters saw Acosta and they accosted him because accosting Acosta is what you want to be doing at a Trump rally. It's pretty funny.
The White House closed out the month of July without holding a briefing for reporters today. That means the White House has held only 3 briefings for the press this month and 8 total since the end of May. There is no other way to describe what the White House is doing these days. Wolf, top officials, including the president, are hiding from the press. And Wolf, just to give you a sense as to what's happening right now, you can hear there is a chorus of boos and other chants from this Trump crowd here in Tampa, Florida. They're saying things like CNN sucks, go home, and fake news. Wolf, obviously, all of those things are false. We're staying right here. We're going to do our job and report on this rally to all of our viewers here tonight. Wolf.
Just as a fact check, when he said all those things are false, CNN sucks actually is true. That part is 100% true. So Acosta just got that wrong. Now Acosta tweets after this, he's whining about this. This is the guy his reporting is so unfair. It is so biased, so one-sided, and that's beside the shouting questions. I'll give him the shouting questions. He wants attention. He wants to be Sam Donaldson. Okay, fine. Shout your questions. Be a rude little man. But that's not the point. I would like Trump to be treated like any politician, roughly, if it hadn't been for the 8 years of Obama being, ascending into heaven and being worshipped and the reporters chanting Obama, Obama, it wouldn't bother me so much if they were attacking Trump, but it just bothers me the difference. It's just that it only applies to one person. So, it is one thing. Acosta's reporting is lousy. It is lousy. It is biased. It is one-sided. He makes no attempt to see the world from the people who the position of the people who support Trump. And then he goes out after they shout at him, as he so richly deserves. I don't like to see reporters being harassed. I do not like to see the press being harassed. Calling Acosta a reporter, borderline misuse of the English language, but even so. But now Acosta says, he tweets out just a sample of the sad scene we faced at the Trump rally in Tampa. I'm very worried that the hostility whipped up by Trump and some in conservative media will result in somebody getting hurt. We should not treat our fellow Americans this way. The press is not the enemy. Like I said the other day, the only real violence that's been committed has been against Trump supporters and against Republicans and against Trump administration people who've been hounded out of restaurants. And all of that is keyed off to the rhetoric coming out of places like CNN. So I do not understand. I am perfectly happy to see Trump stop calling the press the enemy of the people. I'd like to see Nazi reporters get harassed. But, it goes both ways. When he tweeted this, when Acosta tweeted this scene, Mark Caputo of Politico tweeted back about the people who are shouting at him, if you put everyone's mouths together in this video, you'd get a full set of teeth. And then when somebody said, that's not really that funny a joke, he said, well, they're garbage people. They're garbage people. So that's the way the press feels about the people. Why? I'm sorry, but why exactly are the people supposed to say, oh, you're the press, we respect you? I do not get it. I do not get it. It is all happening in their imaginations. If they would stop and ask themselves, what has Trump done that is corrupt? What has he done that is authoritarian? What has he done that is violating the norms of the Constitution? They would find they really have a hard time coming up with anything.